Election day for the 2018 midterms is just a few days away, so if you haven't already, you'll probably start hearing people start to prognosticate about this thing called the blue wave. The phrase blue wave reflects one possible outcome of the election, one where Democrats make substantial progress towards reclaiming control over Congress. Depending on who you ask, it can mean either taking control over both the House of Representatives and the Senate, or just the House. It's become a rallying cry for many on the political left, a way of succinctly articulating their disdain for the current state of things and the forcefulness by which they mean to change it. Many Republicans have taken to publicly casting doubt over the emergence of this wave, discounting the likelihood that Democrats will manage to gain enough seats for control. Others have taken it a step further by insisting that not only will Republicans retain control, they'll actually gain seats. That it's the Republicans who are going to experience a wave. Among this group is none other than President Trump, who has tweeted several times about the quote-unquote red wave. As long as I campaign and or support Senate and House candidates, within reason, they will win. I love the people, and they certainly seem to like the job I'm doing. If I find the time in between China, Iran, the economy, and much more, which I must, we will have a giant red wave. A blue wave means crime and open borders. A red wave means safety and strength. Or, you know, that time he just literally typed out red wave. So, who's right? Is the blue wave going to happen? Are Democrats going to retake control? Or will the red wave unfold with the Republicans not only retaining control, but actually gaining additional seats? My money on both questions is yes. It just depends on whether you're talking about the House or the Senate. Contrary to the president's insistence, the chances of Republicans gaining seats in the House are infinitesimally small, while it's extremely likely that Democrats will win enough seats to retake the majority of the chamber. The blue wave is probably going to happen. But that situation is almost entirely reversed for the Senate. There, it's exceedingly likely that Republicans will maintain their majority or maybe even gain 1 or 2 seats, while it's very unlikely that Democrats will gain control. So maybe it's not so much, a red wave, but it's definitely a red wall. Now, some people are going to just dismiss what I just said as, hogwash and poppycock. Specifically, the small percentage of you guys who are watching from the UK. How you guys doing? Others will just dismiss what I said, with some other turn of phrase. And to all of those who have that general sentiment, I just want to say this. While it's obviously impossible to peer into the future and give a perfect picture of what's going to happen, we do have a lot of circumstantial evidence supporting both of these outcomes. None of them individually are perfectly dispositive, but together, they make a pretty compelling case. So today, on the cusp of Election Day, I want to go over these predictions and why we're so convinced of them. Also, stick around for the end of the video because we're going to have a fun little game / challenge for the election I would like to, get you guys in on. Before we get into it, let's get a lay of the electoral land, as it were. There are currently 435 voting members of the U.S. House of Representatives. They're awarded roughly proportionately by state population, and all 435 go up for election every 2 years. In order to gain a majority, a party must hold 218 of the 435 seats. Republicans currently hold 235 seats, Democrats have 193, and there are 7 vacant seats. In the Senate, meanwhile, there are 100 members with 2 representatives per state. Each senator serves a 6-year term with about 1/3 of the entire chamber going up for election every 2 years. Republicans currently control 51 seats, and Democrats have 47 with 2 independents. Although these independents are Bernie Sanders and Angus King, who both caucus with Democrats, so it's really more like 51 to 49. Alright, so let's start with the evidence for a blue wave in the House. I'm going to talk about 4 key pieces of evidence that support the idea: midterm loss, presidential approval, generic ballot performance, and special election performance. Midterm loss references the well-studied phenomenon where the president's party tends to lose seats in the immediately subsequent election. The midterm elections 2 years after a presidential one. This is more than just a general tendency. You can count on one hand when the pattern has broken, and you'd still have plenty of fingers to spare. Political scientists proffer a few reasons for why they think this happens. One explanation is that the American public fundamentally strives for balance and looks to give Congress more power as a means of keeping the president in check. Another is less idyllic and suggests that the president's supporters tend to feel complacent after a win and thus stay home during the following election, while members of the out party, get mad and get energized and thus, turn out. A third is that it's more of a statistical inevitability, since by definition, the party with the most seats stands to have fewer to gain and more to lose. In any event, although the number of losses can range from a handful of seats to something like the 50 the Republicans picked up in 2014, midterm loss is extremely common and helps the Democrats' overall prospects. Presidential approval is also strongly correlated with the number of seats that the president's party loses in the following election. And, let's be real here, public approval has never exactly been the president's strong suit. Although the president loves to cherry-pick Rasmussen polls that place his favorability at close to, 50%, most polling aggregates have him, in the high 30s to low 40s. He's been very stable at those numbers, which has made his presidency one of the most unpopular in modern history at several different benchmarks. And again, although polling numbers are not perfectly correlated with loss, and the president's consistency adds a wrinkle that, isn't very well encapsulated by many of his predecessors, the general pattern suggests that Democrats will pick up a few seats due to his unpopularity. The generic ballot refers to a question routinely asked by pollsters conducting national-level polls in midterm years. Instead of taking the respondents' geographic information and imputing the candidates running in their district, which would be extremely difficult, time-intensive, and expensive, many pollsters will simply ask if they would support the Republican candidate or the Democratic candidate. There are some variations where they'll put the name of the incumbent but then pit them against a generic candidate from the other party as well. The reason that this measure is the least well correlated among the three is threefold. First, people don't just vote for generic Republican or generic Democrat come election day in the US. They vote for candidates who can be charismatic or flawed in ways that can sway people's decision-making processes. Second, congressional seats aren't doled out based upon how popular candidates are nationally, but how well they perform individually in their home districts. You can and often do have parties that win the majority of seats, but don't win the majority of votes nationwide. Third, and kind of dovetailing in with the second one, the measure doesn't account for the effects of partisan gerrymandering. There are a lot of wasted votes in congressional elections because many lines are drawn for exclusively partisan benefit. Many pollsters think that the Democrats will need to maintain about a 7-point gap in the generic ballot in order to overcome these three factors. At time of filming, there's currently an 8-point gap in favor of the Democrats. Moving away from things that have been historically associated with midterm gains and losses, we could look at the results of things happening in this cycle, congressional special elections. We've had a number of special elections for members of the House and Senate since President Trump's election. Looking at how well he did against Hillary in 2016 versus how well these members of Congress did in their elections and their special elections, we can get an estimate at how much steam, if any, the Democrats are starting to pick up. Fortunately, I actually made this graph a few weeks ago that does exactly that. It demonstrates that the Democrats are doing really well compared to 2016. In all the special elections that have transpired since November of 2016, Republicans have underperformed in all but one of them, and that one, Georgia, was a super tight race that broke records for how much money was spent. Democrats are doing really well in these elections, which can be problematic for Republicans come next week. Now, there's actually a lot more evidence in support of the blue wave than I was able to go over here. You also have the fact that Democrats are more enthusiastic about voting, that more young people than normal have a strong preference on who should win the House and are themselves more excited to vote, that Democratic challengers are out fundraising many incumbent Republicans, and on and on and on. But I've got to keep the video shorter and engaging or else the YouTube algorithm basically sends this video to the Shadow Realm. Speaking of, I think we spent a decent amount of time cramming our brains filled with political stuff. I think that we deserve a quick break to look at cute animals in Halloween costumes. Duh! No! Oh, that's just so cute. Alright. Cute break over, let's get back into it. Now, in elections generally, as the saying goes, the rising tide raises all ships, but the Democrats' prospects haven't gone up in the Senate. In point of fact, they're actually far, far lower. It isn't because the Senate is somehow immune to all of these measures. It's because the Senate battleground happens to be stacked against the Democrats. In order to understand why, let's take a look back at what it takes to win the Senate. Remember that the Democrats basically have 49 seats, Republicans have 51, but only a third of the Senate is elected at any given time. Well, it just so happens that 26 of the 35 seats up for election this year are held by Democrats. Remember how I mentioned that midterm loss is partially a function of the fact that the majority simply has fewer opportunities to gain but more to lose? Even if the Democrats are the minority in the chamber, they're actually the majority of elections in this cycle. Unlike the House, which has a large number of Republican incumbents in competitive elections, most of the Republicans up for election in the Senate are in states that are largely considered safe. There are only 4 Republican-held seats that are considered toss-ups according to the Cook Political Report, with one more that, only leans to the right. Democrats, however, have 5 toss-ups, 2 in states that only lean to the left, and 1 in a state that actually leans right. Meanwhile, the visible fighting over the confirmation of Justice Kavanaugh has galvanized many Republicans. While this hurts Democrats' chances in the House too, it's especially bad in the Senate, where blame can be directly attributed to some of the people who are actually on the ballot, and considering the fact that the Democrats have a much smaller margin to work with there as it is. So, at the end of the day, there's a mountain of evidence supporting the notion of a blue wave in the House. but it doesn't extend to the Senate. In fact, it actually seems like the idiosyncrasies of this particular election makes a red wall the most likely outcome there. Now, there's one thing that I'd like to entreat you before I talk about the challenge and the comments from last week. Please, 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 freaking vote. I don't care if you're a Democrat, a Republican, a conservative, a liberal, whatever. Vote. Representative systems only work if you hold representatives accountable and let them know what your policy preferences are. While I'm personally a huge fan of participating in politics and government in a myriad of different ways outside of the election, elections are the cornerstone of representative democracies. Vote. Alright, now that we've got that out of the way, I of course would love to see your thoughts on this video as always, but I'd also like to propose a game with you. The election is happening next Tuesday, so we'll know that by the next time this video airs how everything has turned out. There'll be a special election recap episode next week where we'll talk about the results. So I'd like to propose a game that I'm like blatantly ripping off a post that my thesis advisor put on Facebook. I want you guys to guess 3 things. 1, how many seats the Democrats will have won in the House. 2, how many seats the Republicans will have won in the Senate. And 3, what percentage of the country, doing it as a percent two-party vote, will the Democrats have won? I'll put my answers and my guesses down in a pinned comment down below. The person who has the lowest whole error across all 3 guesses will be the winner. I don't know what they'll get if they win. If I had merch, I'd offer that, but I don't, and I'm certainly far too broke to offer cash, so it might just be, bragging rights, but we'll see how it plays out. So put those guesses down in the comment section below. We'll see how they fare out next week. Last week we talked about the US government's zombie survival plan, so let's shuffle on over there to see what you guys had to say. I was honestly surprised that there was only one comment on the puns that I made, and it was Jace the Deck Builder's comment saying that he liked them. So there's 1 vote in favor of continuing to make them, none, so far as I can see, against them, so I'm gonna keep doing it. This channel is nothing but a democracy after all. So in the video I mentioned that zombie chickens were the only kind of zombie known to have happened, and Eric Schmidt reminded me that I had totally forgotten a really cool example of a symbiotic zombie, a fungal family called cordyceps. It hijacks an ant's brain, makes it travel to like a high leaf or branch or something near the other ants, and then proceeds to just casually burst out of the ant's head so it could spread its pores to the other ants. It is simultaneously one of like the neatest and most terrifying things I've ever seen in the animal kingdom. If any of you guys also feel like Hydrogen won and feel like you wouldn't be prepared for a natural disaster, I recommend that you would go check out the CDC's disaster checklist. It can be a literal lifesaver, and it's never a wrong time to make a preparedness kit. Link for that is going to be down in the doobly-doo. I love you guys. Stay safe out there. Make yourself a preparedness kit. That's all the time that we have for today. Thank you guys so much for your comments. Please, please, please keep them coming. And don't forget to put your guesses down in the comment section below for next week. Sources for everything is always down in the doobly-doo, as well as links to Facebook, Twitter, and the blog. Look forward to seeing you guys out there as well. If you enjoyed this video, hope you consider giving it a thumbs up. If you want to support the channel, you can do so by commenting down below, by sharing this video, by subscribing to the channel and staying in the loop for more awesome social science content is uploaded. If you want to be guaranteed to be in the loop when I upload a new video, be sure to click the bell icon as well. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you next time.